looking for Carol Irene, my co-fondatrice, and she is there. Okay, great. Now I can start. I wouldn't start without her. So bring it a little bit closer. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. And today I'd like to talk about building a new book-selling ecosystem and what that entails. The difference between what we call the gleam in the eye, where you have an idea, and the reality. So, without too much preamble, let me begin with the story of my life. Like many people, I'm drawn to books. For me, it was growing up in a sort of cultural wasteland and the bookmobile coming to my town, which brought books and culture. And I have a feeling that everyone here has a variant of this, the discovery of books and how it changed our lives and made things possible. I went on to try to write serious fiction, poetry, and in New York, where I'm from, and ended up working for a book packager just to eat. We call that pot boiling. And so he, in 1984, was doing choose-your-own-adventure style pathway books, which were nonlinear storytelling. And you would make choices about what you wanted to do in the story and jump to different pages. And if you chose wrong, you die, right? So this got me really interested in software and interactive storytelling and graphical adventures and massively multiplayer games and a whole range of entertainment and educational software. I ended up at Yahoo at one point where I was focused on intellectual property development and patents. And the interesting thing about Yahoo, and this is like 2005 to 2009, is that there was a really brilliant group of people there that were focused in a very forward-looking way on large-scale changes in the marketplace, the way things would likely evolve, and particularly around mobile and the advent of mobile and social and the social graph, and media and commerce and rights. And so we had a group of scientists, engineers, designers, and artists really trying to invent the future for purposes of patent development, but also for product development. And it was a great education, and it was seeing things before they would happen. So from there, in 2009, I left and formed Invention Arts, where we did large-scale innovation projects around rights, user rights, and user data for the Finnish government, World Economic Forum, and so on. But the truth is, my first love was always books and writing. So at a certain point, enough, and I went back to books. I also want to introduce my co-fondatrice. That's Carol Irene right there. That's actually what she looks like in real life, sitting at the cafe with her brother. And please say hi to her. And she also happens to be French. And so we are a French-American company, very proudly. And really, it's a delight to be here. So in getting into books, really the focus and interest was in the early days for both Carol and myself and our collaborators was illustrated, graphical, and interactive books. And I'm going to take you around to this ecosystem and the path that got us there. Because everything, as you know, as developers, as artists, as creators, is kind of a discovery. You have a vision, and then you discover all the interim steps to get there. So we started with this notion of, well, what could books be in an era where the design palette is equal to device capabilities. The original ebooks, very simple. Text, as John Ingram calls it, text under glass, right? So that's all it really was. Networks, some sharing, very cool. It was a revelation when it first came out, but limited given the device capabilities, because devices now have any kind of interactivity. And I think this is a segue from the last presentation. Tactile, touchable, text and images, rich animation. We looked at this set of geolocation and networking and the social graph being built into it and media creation and said, the palette for this device is extraordinary. The things that you can do with it are limited only by your talent and imagination and your will to suffer. I mean, your will to experiment. sorry. So this was very exciting. In fact, if you know the old, I looked at this and said, we're going to need a bigger boat here. And this is a monster, right? This is it. So Airbook was formed, and it was the predecessor to Ariel. And the focus was illustrated, media-rich, optionally interactive books, going all the way back to that first print book where you turn to page 28 or you turn to page 52, but much richer. And so we began to develop in Airbook these kinds of rich graphical books. This one with Joey Ito, who's now the head of EDRLab, but used to be a crazy kid down in Santa Clara, from an illustrious family. Comics, manga, graphic novels. And these are pages from fixed layout, which I know is controversial for some people, but I don't care. Graphically complex books. There are certain books that could only be done in this way. And I know there are questions, very real questions about accessibility and so on, so I don't mean to minimize that. But here we were focused on what is this rich kind of presentation you could do with children's read aloud storybooks. And these are actually books that we created in Airbook. What we decided to do is begin to build these books and get into tearing these books apart. And ePUB 3 and iBooks capabilities were very important and powerful to us, and we also had the opportunity to put a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger in our books, so that was very exciting for us. And also chocolate. And also, big television stars, catch-up guides for TV and so on. Michael Tamlin, who is a wonderful speaker of Kobo, had this observation that 30% of print books are illustrated, but a small fraction of ebooks are illustrated. So why is that? And I was talking to somebody, a young woman who's an editor doing children's books, and I'm very fascinated to see what she will do and what others will do as the medium emerges. But here it was, behold, the era of rich, illustrated, maybe even interactive ebooks, except there was a problem. It really has had a difficult time happening. So why? Why? When all those pieces are there, when there's so much innovation on the web, and the medium is so rich and so capable, and ePUB 3 and all its capabilities in scripting and so on had those opportunities. And you start, as often you start with love, you end up with money, the conversation. And sometimes in your work, you start with art and you end up with money. And it becomes about the money. The difficulty we see, and the difficulty which Idpf and Readium and ePUB 3 seek to address, and I think crucially so for the good of and the health of our culture. And I don't mean to overstress that, but I feel very strongly that the work of the group is extremely powerful and important, and in ways that people don't even realize when they're engaging with it. They tend to think, okay, what format am I using? But this notion that we are in a marketplace of incompatible proprietary formats and device capabilities is absolutely deadly, both for introducing new forms of content and culture, and for finding that and consuming it as we move increasingly to mobile devices and our lives move online and they become more virtual. This was, actually, these are slides from, I sat with Bill and a couple of other folks from Idpf and last night. And this is a slide I presented in 2013, actually. I don't know if Bill remembers, when we started introducing our transition to commerce from Airbook. And here, these were the issues that we had in attempting to deliver these rich books. A very fragmented marketplace, very fragmented capabilities, really mind-boggling kind of proposition of what you could really do, what you can count on. What it boils down to is it's always the question of either you go deep and develop and use all the capabilities of a platform, and then limit your audience because you only work on that platform, or you build the least common denominator, something that will work on all platforms. This is the eternal tension when you're faced with different platforms. And this tension, we think, has limited, it's pretty certainly limited that marketplace up to now. Things will change. They may change, but right now that's what we dealt with. There were also numerous other impediments as we began to look at the problems of publishers in getting to readers. That includes people living in social streams. Right? People are not, as we move to mobile, and Benedict Evans has written and spoken beautifully about this, and a number of others, Mary Meeker, and there are a lot of people have spoken to this issue, but as the primary device becomes the mobile device, people are not sitting and typing in URLs so much. They are receiving media in a stream, right? And it's all links and streams, and those are organized, and I'll talk about that in a bit, around interests and relationships. So how do you reach those people? Publishers have difficulty getting customer information. They have retailer partners, but they also want to know the customer. A lot of high-friction processes. Everyone sort of knows a lot of these. This is a big one. This one, 2 years ago, London Book Fair, it sort of broke out. This notion of loss of business control to platforms, right? It wasn't supposed to be that way. You know, there was a point where there was a new market opened up. And that new market, you know, took you and showed you wonderful things as a publisher. And then it said, no, this way. And by the way, you're paying for dinner, right? And I want your lunch, right? That's a nice jacket you got there. Okay. All right. Metrics and analytics, product development, you know, format fragmentation, all of these impediments really, you know, hit the wall for us. So we began to look at, okay, so what can AirBook, which is the predecessor to Ariel, do to address that? So we built this, which we demonstrated at Idpf presentations and others, building, you know, rich, interactive ebooks, fixed layout in the browser. This is still up and running, AirBook Maker, and then packaging those in multiple formats. The kind of approach we took was, okay, we will figure out what capabilities will export to what platform. There is a Kindle KF8 fixed layout version of this, but it doesn't do any scripting. There is a version for iBooks, which is a little bit richer, and exporting those. And then the question is, you've got these books, how do you get them to market? So you know, after making software for 30 years, one of the design dictums, which is, you know, essential to me, and I think, is that usually the best thing you can do is the only thing that will work. You know, that's a kind of a, if you know what I'm saying. And so if you're building these and you have difficulty delivering enough of them, well, let's, you know, go direct. Let's sell direct. Let's make it possible. So then we added social DRM, which was a term invented by Bill McCoy, I believe. He's shooting me daggers. It's a great term to say SDRM, you know, putting, you know, user recognizable information in the book and some watermarking and so on, which is really a brilliant kind of solves the problem approach to social DRM, but there are other issues with it. And distribute and preview and sell direct, and sell in stores and sell direct. Post directly your books where people are likely to find them, and also set up affiliates. You know, basically try to get to a new way to put these books in front of people and not be stuck going through the limitations of a platform, but be able to use the complete capabilities of the platform for those people who are willing to experience them. So let's not have an impediment. Let's sell it direct. It used to be in the world, if I made something, I could sell it to you. But with the rise of platforms and centralized kind of superstores and the introduction of proprietary formats, there's this gatekeeper thing where I cannot make something and sell it to you. So when we think of building an ebook distributed, decentralized, independent book-selling ecosystem, well, gee, we had one 50, 100 years ago, right? Where did it go? Right? It's still here. It's still very alive in France. In the US, it's under a lot of pressure. I just saw today that Barnes & Noble sold off its Nook technology, right? So that's big nail in the coffin there. So we had this whole sort of notion about that, and we built it, and really kind of introduced the concept at that point in the evolution is retail as a service. The notion that if I am able to gather an audience, if I am able to curate a selection of books and recommend them to you, then I would like to sell them to you. But the impediments to doing commerce online are actually fairly daunting in some ways, because if you think about what people would like, yeah, there are certain books you can sell direct, but if you really want to meet customer needs, the requirements are fairly intense. So we thought, okay, how do we package all those capabilities of retail up and offer them as a service, where we're not the retailer, but we're helping you. In fact, everyone in this audience be a retailer if they wanted to. Or the brick and mortar store, the physical store, bookstore on the corner that the ABA, brings to us that has no online commerce and wants it and has something that is insufficient. How do we support them, or a celebrity, or somebody else? We realized at a certain point this is not a product problem, it's an ecosystem problem. I think there are people here who knew that from the beginning, but as we step through from product, you get to a point of a level of abstraction of understanding your problem, and that changes everything, and that gives you the light. All right? So finally, I get to Ariel, and I'm not selling you Ariel today. I'm using it as an illustration for the considerations of building an ecosystem, because what Ariel really is, from a sort of the product presentation, which is what we developed in Invention Arts, is to make any point of interest a point of sale for anyone to buy or sell, and make it possible to get your own bookstore really in minutes. In under a minute, you can, boom, you're in business. And there are actually 14 million titles to choose from, because I'm happy to report that as of December, Ariel, which was developed in Invention Arts, was purchased as a service and now is being deeply integrated with Ingram, which is a global sort of powerhouse in distribution and print on demand and retail services and publisher services. And this is very strategic to them as well, to create this ecosystem for both ebooks and print books, and to also make it possible for people to add their own books. And you can go to Ariel, and if you act now, no, sorry. So it's really, in fact, it is the level of, there's the way you speak to the market, but there's the way you think about what you're making. Two different things, right? And hopefully they converge at some point. And also people also understand what you're saying and agree with it. So really, Ariel is a new and decentralized independent book-selling ecosystem. It's a rather bold and crazy play in a way, but we think that there are a lot of participants that are already working in it very clearly. So we're trying to leverage the power of an Ingram, which is a trusted third party. They don't want your dinner. They don't pay you to pay for dinner. They don't want your lunch. They want to make money, but they don't want to own your customer. Right? They don't want to own your business relationships, and they don't want to squeeze you until you cry. Just until you feel a little uncomfortable, that's all. So Ariel is not a retailer. Ariel is a trusted third party providing retail as a service. And you can see this on the site. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but basically you can upload your books or choose from 14 million titles that are in the the Ingram catalogs. I mean, it's literally, I sometimes describe the Ingram warehouses as, it's like the last minute of Indiana Jones, or Citizen Kane, where you do that pull shot and you see this warehouse full of treasures and dust, and nobody knows what's in there. I mean, the things I've found in those warehouses just by searching is remarkable. But there are 14 million. You can also, it's been designed, as I mentioned, for self-service as well as enterprise service. But there, you build that store, you embed your storefront on a website or share the products in any of your social streams or presence. There are SMS connections where you can text a keyword and get a book back that you can buy from a location. Really putting that point of sale at the point of interest to make commerce ambient, right? Rather than a place, rather than something you do when you go to a destination. the book should come to you. It's possible for the book to be everywhere in your present, or like Flaubert's author, everywhere present and nowhere visible until you want to see it. And then it's sharing and previewing in any social stream, and then getting all the customer relationships and so on. And that's for publishers, that's for retailers, for sellers, brick and mortar sellers, or people who are selling other things that are related, media companies and bloggers, and also authors. So this is a new kind of retail network. And this is, again, sort of flowing logically. Usually the best thing you can do is the only thing that will work. In a marketplace that is dominated by a couple of very large online retailers, and maybe one in particular, what are the approaches that you can take to build another ecosystem where you're not really just crazy? Convincing yourself of things that are not realistic. You have to have a plausible chance to actually do this. So in the case of Ariel, anyone who's a participant in that network, if you sign up and create an account, you can take any one of three roles. You can be a supplier, a publisher. You can be a seller who sells books, your books or somebody else's books, or both. And you can be a buyer. So one account, all three. So it leads you to things like, buy a book from Ariel and we'll throw in the bookstore for free, right? Not everybody's going to be able to sell books. Booksellers sell books. We really believe that. So the capabilities are there. It's that combination of aesthetic judgment and curation and passion for the work and business sense that makes a bookseller. So just because you can press a button and have a bookstore doesn't mean in our mind that there are now a million successful bookstores. But we do think that there are a lot more capabilities that we can bring to existing booksellers and also bring new sellers into the marketplace. So in this model, the network itself is a retail ecosystem, right? On this side of the slide, and there won't be a test, these are people who can function as sellers. Right? That's media and publishers. That's book publishers. It can also be magazine publishers, media sites, TED, influencers. That's YouTubers, celebrities, authors. There's a big evangelical group in the U.S. And pastors, and they have these mega churches, and they very good at marketing. Destinations, hotels, sporting goods. An Airbnb, love it or hate it, that's a place where I'm looking at coming to Bordeaux. That might be a nice place for me to get a Bordeaux guide, right? That's native commerce, right? That's the point of interest. That's where I want the book. It's just like when you're in a gift shop in San Francisco. You have books about the history of San Francisco because you're there. It's that contextual commerce. Brick and mortar stores, I will tell you that we are very influenced by meetings that we've had here with our friends at Hachette, with Monsieur Mollat, and others, to understand the power and importance of the independent bookstore in France and how it is a treasured national resource. So this became and is part of the requirement for Ariel, is that everything we do should support that bookseller as well, not to be an impediment. And in fact, the American Bookseller Association got in touch and said, hey, this Ariel looks like we could really. So they have 1,700, and it's okay to say this, they have 1,700 stores in the ABA, of which 1,000 have either no e-commerce or just marketing. They have either no website or they have only a social presence. And they too want to have 14 million books and good economics and so on to be able to serve their customers. So we designed to make sure that that's a requirement in organizations. And where can they sell? Well, anywhere, right? So on a website. If you only have Facebook, but you have 2 million followers, that's the place to put your books for sale. So in a social stream or Pinterest or what have you, media streams, if that's what you're doing, locations, or even in native apps where we've done some integrations. So why do we really need a new retail ecosystem? This maybe I kind of skipped through because I think a lot of people here understand why this is the case. But book selling, as I said, has become overly centralized. The sale of too many books is in the hands of too few companies. And that on the face of it, I think, is problematic. A wise friend said to me this, and I had to put it up here, that every rabbit needs 2 holes. Words to live by to all those rabbits out there, and myself included. And if there's a fox that, and you have 1 hole, you're in trouble. Okay, so how do we get to that second hole? How did we get to this 1 hole problem anyway? The net really introduced a lot of powerful and spectacular dynamics in business. One of the things you saw, which has good and bad aspects, is the rise of the winner-take-all platform. And there's a lot about this. I'm by no means the world expert in this. You can certainly find winner-take-all, 2-sided networks and platforms. But suffice to say that a platform is not just a retailer. I mean, Amazon is a platform, right? It looks like a retailer, but it's really a platform. There are buyers here, and there are sellers here, and they connect, right? And in the case of books, maybe they're suppliers, and they do buy some, but now there's a rich marketplace. If you take into account the self-publishers, they're really suppliers, right? And so they're being connected with buyers. So these platforms, you need to grow both sides of them, but when they work, the network effects begin to kick in, and that is every time you add another participant to the network, it increases the value of the network to all existing participants. And so it has this strange effect. So for example, Uber, which I know is much loved in France, has, by French taxi drivers, but it's pretty good to be able to. So this is an example of a winner-take-all kind of Uber effect. You get more drivers. Demand brings in drivers. There's a sort of jump-starting that has to happen. There has to be a need, but once you have that, more drivers bring in more coverage, right? More saturation. That results with more drivers and faster pickups, happier customer. There's less driver downtime. The drivers are happy because they're sitting in the car waiting for a ride, fewer minutes, right? They're making money. That lowers prices now because you have more drivers, which creates more demand. And next thing you know, you have this virtuous circle, if you want to call it virtuous, brings in more drivers, and it's an ecosystem, that is now spinning in a big way. It's like a ramjet. If you know what a ramjet is, a ramjet works to make your plane fly by taking in air at the front, compressing it, and then applying flame to it to produce the combustion that drives it forward. And it has the strange effect of the faster it goes, right? Fun fact, the ramjet was invented in France in 1913. And here's this wonderful craft I just came across last night, the 1947 Leduc ramjet, one of the crazy and wonderful aircraft of all time. Anyway, so ramjets. So books meet ramjet, right? Traditionally, we had the publisher. The publisher brings together authors. They create books. Readers love authors and books, right? That relationship is probably the strongest in the supply chain, the reader and the book or the author, much as we'd like to think we have the strongest part of the supply chain. That relationship, and that's between the love of the book and the reader and the author, is transferred to booksellers. And everyone is happy. So the bookseller is then able to bring customers. It's fine for them to collect the money and have those customer relationships, right? But at a certain point in the rise of the web, a big retailer figured out that if they cut the cost of books dramatically, starting to play with one side of this 2-sided network, this platform, you bring a lot of readers. Well, what good is it to have all those readers and buyers if you have no margin? There's no money. Well, user data, interests, permissions, credit cards, you begin to develop. In fact, you can use an entire category of cultural output as a loss leader to create another business, which is kind of what happened. Right? It's shocking in a way. It's audacious. It's Trump-like. No, I'm sorry. I just had to say that. And we apologize for Trump, by the way. No, okay. And I hope he isn't president because I'm in trouble then. I know. I'll be audited. So this is lifetime customer value, right? That's really what the game was. It wasn't about the margin on the sale of the book, and that's why it distorted the marketplace. So how do you move those things back to publishers, authors, books, and conventional booksellers? How does that happen, right? Book selling network effects, they kind of look good. Well, maybe more demand, more suppliers, they bring more books, the self-publishers come in, there's more choices, there's lower prices. It superficially looks good, but the truth is, this is a winner-take-all kind of market and a platform, not a conventional retailer. And so there are some very profound negative effects. The other retailers are choked off. Suppliers are squeezed. This is played out in all the national papers. I mean, it's pretty obvious. There's less budget available for books outside a narrowing set of categories. This is definitely happening in the US. You don't have a platform, you don't have a category, we don't know where we can sell this. I'm sorry, I got no advance for you. That's a profound negative for our culture. Self-publishing, booming, wonderful. It's more and cheaper supply, to grow that ramjet. No surprise, right? If I can't get more books from you cheaper, I will go to, anyone who has a book, right? There's a certain logic in that engine that really prefigures the rise of self-publishing. But it tends towards genre fiction. This is really, there are a lot of crazy things written, some wonderful things written, but it really tends towards genre fiction. And then you have this problem of the filter bubble, which is kind of fascinating. It was a fellow named Eli Pariser first came up with this notion of the filter bubble. So what is the filter bubble? And I think we've all sort of intuited this. Filter bubble, and there's a book that Eli Pariser wrote, and you can get it on Ariel, by the way. But the filter bubble says that algorithms will guess what users would like to see based on information about them. Their past search history, their friends, their context, what they've seen before, what they've bought before. That's the selection. And then users then become isolated in their own cultural or ideological bubbles because they're not seeing the whole world. They have algorithms that are trying to be your friend and be helpful and increase the conversion rate and the sales, but what they end up doing is narrowing. And now you're not exposed, and it's not like that experience we've all had of a random walk through a bookstore. What better thing is there to do? But in online, the sort of logic of the software and the profit imperative takes you in that direction. And by the way, there's the filter bubble at work. If I'm searching for the filter bubble, customers also bought this. So next thing you know, these are going to be pointing me at the filter bubble. You end up with this little sort of internal self-referential recursive fractal. Anyway, loss of diversity. So let's build a new ecosystem, right? Not so fast, buddy. There's a lot of requirements. Vast catalogs, self-service. I'll go through these in different ways. And as we now, in earnest, with the resources and the reach, attempt to build this. And I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I need a time check. I'm good. Industry standard. I'll get into these. There's a lot of requirements as you get into it because you start with a product or a capability, and then it's like painting a corner of a room, right? And you have to paint that wall, and then you have to paint that room, and then the house kind of looks, So first and foremost, it's important to recognize when you're doing this that you're serving three constituencies, including, and it's sort of implicit that you're one of them, but from an outward facing, there are three. There's the publisher. You need to serve publisher needs. There's the seller, and there's the reader, right? So you can't build one, it's three legs of the stool. You can't build a stool with two legs that work. You have to address all three. That's a very big challenge, I will say, because it involves so much of what, the different pieces that we're working on, from what Micah is doing in terms of user experience and trying to create an open yet vertically integrated experience of Bluefire, to the standards bodies, trying to build open standards, and then to sellers. All the requirements, all of these three constituencies have sort of, bedrock requirements. or baseline requirements, attractive economics. Of course, it has to work. Digital and print. It can't be only digital, it can't be only print, it needs to be both. It hardly needs explanation. It's important to recognize that this phone is now not, there isn't the mobile experience, this is the primary platform. It's where most of the people spend most of their time. And in that platform, the social stream or the interest stream is a dominant form of media. And, how do you make that commerce happen there and make it ambient? And then, moreover, having run a small startup with, brilliant people, but a small startup with a certain amount of cash in the bank, you're insane if you think that big interests are going to bet on your ecosystem, no matter how beautifully it's articulated or built. Because, it's prudent for them to see your balance sheet. How much money you got in the bank, by the way, buddy? So this is a requirement, industry bedrock, and it needs to be trusted and a third party. And our meetings here last year also stressed that. It cannot be one participant, and a big bookseller or a big publisher cannot bring a new ecosystem because they're a participant in that ecosystem. It has to be a trusted third party who is disinterested in a sense and doesn't want what you have, right? And it needs to be built on open standards and built to scale. And we've had this slide for years in our, I'm proud to say, in our presentations. We're publishers, and I'll show you some examples of how we're addressing some of these things, and by no means have we addressed everything. It's important to have self-service workflows we've discovered. A publisher, even if it's a very large publisher, is composed of people who have jobs to do to get books out the door, promoted and sold. And they don't want to put in a JIRA ticket and ask for engineering or some IT team to build them something. What they want is a self-service platform to do it. And if you're a self-publisher or a small publisher, self-service makes sense too because it's cheap, fast, nobody wants 10 minutes. So nobody wants to have an impediment, a technical impediment. But you also need volume enterprise workflows to bring in 75,000 books. Or 50,000 books, and push them through a system. It's important to have varied approaches to market as well, because much as we'd like to say, sell direct or sell with certain partners, publishers are already working with an ecosystem. It's insane for them to say no Amazon, because they have a lot of customers that are self-identified as Amazon customers. So you have to be able to support, if you're doing something, that kind of sale, as well as a direct sale or a new kind of seller. They need to be able to preview and sell anywhere, and then they need DRM choice. And that's the way we think of it. Having come around to it, I mean, it's easy to have an opinion and be political about DRM, and it's really a complex issue because I was part of the team at Yahoo that helped get rid of DRM and Yahoo Music and so on. But the truth is that you have legacy contracts and relationships where it's not that simple. It isn't a matter of a better argument. There is a great inertia around these things, and you have to be practical and realize that. So to provide good alternatives from which the best choices are made to restrictive DRM. And DRM, hard DRM is not a problem. It's proprietary DRM, but that becomes a requirement. So there is a self-service to get a book in. Just press a button. Give me your ePUB, give me your PDF, and I'll turn it into an ePUB 3, fixed layout. There are volume interfaces for publishers over time for master accounts with multiple sub-imprints and populating stores and importing books, ebooks to get them into the Ariel service. There's what we call Ariel Flyer, and that is, I'm proud to say, built on Readium.js. It's a fairly wide deployment of Readium.js, and it's a book in the browser, and it's used primarily for samples. You can read an entire book as well, but that provides a social look inside the book in any stream or app. That's an example. You're books, and we feel that books should be as shareable as other humble or maybe exalted forms of media, like cat videos, certainly. And you need to be able, as a publisher, to send buyers to any retailer or sell direct, and then provide a good mobile experience. So this is an example. We have a large-scale deployment with HarperCollins, for example, and it's nothing like being tweeted by Neil Gaiman to show your server logs spike like crazy. But so this is just this is how a link to his book in AirBook opens up inside the browser. It's like a reader in the browser, and it has information that you just basically start reading, and this is Readium.js, right? And we hacked a lot of capabilities into it. It's a web app, effectively, that uses that as the reader. And then there's social sharing and purchase capabilities and so on. If you hit that button, open it up, and share on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and so on. Comments are built into it. They're Facebook comments to disseminate interest in the book. If you share the book, then it will show up and expand inside the social network to show, just like that cat video, to show a preview and a canonical image. This is a browsing table on Pinterest that HarperCollins put together. And these are just links shared in Pinterest, which is a very popular graphical collection application in the US. I'm not sure how widespread it is everywhere in the world, but it is hundreds of millions of users collecting things. And this is just sharing a link. There's no special code, and you're able to to see that book expressed that way. And ordering within tweets, beginning to become native. And also, and we just implemented this last week because there's something called, we're seeing competition come in this, but this is a book in the inventory in Ariel, an ebook, and you can choose to create different types of widgets. This one is the on-page sample. So it will embed Readium right on the page, surrounded by other content, so you're reading the book and it's embedded directly. It doesn't really look like a page, but that's what that is. That's a page with the book, and you're reading it, and then there's other article and ads and everything around it. And just a quick word about social metadata. Part of what has informed and expressing the book in to make it a first-class social object in a mobile social world, we think is incredibly important. We'd love to see some of these things work their way into standards for ePUB. So the original web metaphor, just step back for a second, was really sort of based around the physical world in this conception, that you, the user, navigate with your navigator to an address, a destination, a portal. Right? You go inside and you find stuff and you leave. We talk in terms of pages, but we think in terms of destinations. We thought, you travel the World Wide Web, right? This information superhighway. But with the advent of mobile, you, the user, are not so much a visitor to a destination. You are the destination. And this is a profound shift that is very important to our industry and to us. The user is the destination. You are the still point in a moving stream of media, right, that's organized around relationships or interests. The media comes to you. And so how do you reach those people? You need to be able to put your media into those streams, because that's where the people are. Right? They asked the American bank robber, Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? And he said, because that's where the money is. Right? So if you wanted to find readers and people, you need to go to where they are, and they're sitting in social streams, predominantly. So the book needs to be wrapped in a way that allows it to express in a full and expandable way inside those streams. We as an industry are very good about supply chain metadata. It's essential. But in fact, these networks don't pay any attention, or minimal attention, to supply chain metadata, book industry supply chain metadata. Can you read line 6? No. So every book in Ariel, or AirBook, this is what it says here, and you can see this, you just expand it, or just view source, has a block of what's called social metadata. And it's pretty straightforward. It's open graph metadata. This set of attributes is what a social network pays attention to in figuring out how to display your object in the social network. So there's the title, the canonical title, a link to its cover, where the thing lives, what sort of entity is it. For certain networks, they have other enhancements, like you can declare it a product and it will display in different ways. Who's the creator? Where's the site? Who's the author? All of these things are not that hard to do, in a way, but they need to be done. And in order to do it for books, each book needs to have its own URL with this social metadata embedded in that page, right? So that's one of the things we're doing, but we think, the more people that do this, for the more books, the better. Ingram and Ariel have that service. Anything that goes in there, books will have that open graph metadata. But we think the one thing I'll soapbox about is no matter how it happens for the books that I love, that we love, they need this now in order to be as visible as possible where people spend their time, right? And then DRM is another consideration, is, it's crazy, it's like religion in a way, But what role does it play? And SDRM, how does that support the diverse ecosystem? We have built an SDRM system with watermarking and personally identifiable information. We'll be announcing some other expansions to that because we really believe in the beauty of the concept. And its simplicity and its ability to address entire markets. But we sort of think in this very reductive way of three kinds of DRM. There's hard DRM, there's soft DRM, and there's proprietary DRM, right? So the problem isn't hard DRM. That's really not the problem. The problem is hard DRM plus proprietary DRM, right? And so that's a roadblock, right? So if I want to, for example, sell if I need, as a publisher, hard, restrictive DRM, I cannot, and I want to support another ecosystem, or I want to sell direct, I cannot sell to a Kindle user, a self-identified Kindle user, because I don't have access to that device. So immediately, you're not addressing the total available market. So there's sort of like the purity of our technical visions, and then there's the reality of the marketplace where people are rewarded for selling books. So, that's the issue. So right now SDRM solves that problem, but, and it's beginning to grow in different marketplaces, which is wonderful to see. But key publishers, they require hard DRM. So I will say there's no resolution yet. Coming shortly, we're looking at all the alternatives, LCP, Sony, Adobe, which feels a little bit like, and respect everybody's journey, but it feels a little bit like investing in Flash, just with the advent of the iPhone. So it's kind of hard to bring yourself to do that. So we're looking at those, but resolution is required because we are pro-choice when it comes to DRM. It's the choice of the publisher, the rights holder, the reader to either participate in that or not. It's not for us to tell you that you don't have hard DRM or restrictive DRM on your content. That's your content. You can make that decision. You can bury it if you want and have it discovered 1,000 years from now. That's your choice. So what we have is no DRM, SDRM, and TBD, shortly, hard DRM, to make sure that every catalog can get into Ariel. And I'm going to zip a little bit here, but for sellers, they require also self-service and volume. They need a vast catalog of print and ebooks. Distributed branding is really important. If you're retail as a service, then branding is important because that relationship is between the store, the brand that's selling the book, and the customer. It's not between Ariel. Ariel is a utility mark. If you have an Ariel account, you can sign in with your Ariel account, get in touch with us for support. So all of that needs to be there and selling everywhere. So this has 2 million products. It's now with the merger or the acquisition, it's 14 million products. A lot of great publishers in the mix, a lot of customization of those offerings. All of this is in the dashboard. Great economics. You can make 20% of the sale at list. You can discount it. Right, you can charge more, just like a retailer, but you can set this up in a minute, and we'd handle the taxes and the fulfillment and the sales reporting and all of those things, customer support. And if you're a brick and mortar seller in the U.S., that 20%, that would be nice as a net as a net margin, you know. But it's rare for a bookseller to get to 20% net margin. But the gross margin on an Ariel sale is like the net margin because we're handling all of the cost of the sale. You're bringing the customer. That's what you're doing. And it's beautiful, and it has, you know, sexy actors and actresses in there. Yeah, so, and it's responsive and mobile, as I mentioned, and socially rich. It's funny, when you have anyone who's worked a conference, usually in the first day you speak, you know, in loving detail about your product, and by the second day you're saying, it's good, fast, cheap. Buy it, you know. So I'm just kind of zipping through here a little bit. And here you can see this publisher is choosing to sell direct or send people to Amazon, or if they're bringing people, or Barnes & Noble, or Books A Million, if they're bringing people to the point of conversion, that publisher wants to not lose the sale because the customer self-identifies as a member of another retail ecosystem. Embed these anywhere with a line of code. And there's Tumblr, you know, Book Launch, Squarespace, WordPress. There's a lot of integrations there. And finally, the requirements of the reader, the buyer. You know, obviously they want good prices. They want reasons to buy from you. Why should they buy from you, right? I love talking to Micah because he has such a clear sense of what it means to build a Micah of Bluefire, who spoke yesterday. There's such a clear sense of the integrated customer post-file experience. You know, how do you do that, you know, at scale in a very distributed way? Because it kind of suggests proprietary readers and so on. So that's a very bold undertaking and a very important one. And it has to be reliable, because if I'm a customer and I'm buying an ebook from somebody, how do I know you're not going to be gone? I mean, Barnes & Noble pulled out of, Nook pulled out of the UK. You know, and you know, so this is a big concern. So that it's a practical concern. It's not technical. You know, it has to be international. So working with the wonderful folks at Hachette, you know, with Ariel Flyer, you know, to make that available. It's funny. I was on the train coming down, and I saw the actual print book of that, and I was like, wow, there's that thing. It's real. You know, book clubs is another reason, you know, that's an author, that's a publisher connecting. Okay, so we have book clubs, that's a reason to buy. Free books, authors can connect. This is interesting, a portion of your sale going to a cause or something like that. There's a lot of different reasons for people to buy things. And then you can see here that there are multiple formats that you take your delivery in, including, you know, of course, ePUB, but automatic Kindle conversion, different suppliers, and the reliability of the Ingram Content Group, 50 years, and, you know, just a great company. So that is Ariel. New decentralized independent bookselling ecosystem, and it's important to make all the right choices in life. It's very difficult to figure out what those are, but if you make the wrong choices, always remember everything blows up and you die. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Nous sommes très en retard, mais on va quand même pouvoir prendre une ou deux questions, je pense, avant de passer à un café qui devra être court, du coup, pour pouvoir continuer. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions dans le public? Eh bien, s'il n'y en a pas, on va pouvoir passer au café directement. Alors.
Café.
Café. Il y aura des questions au café.
Questions or café? I would choose the café.